Just because you're paranoid, it doesn't mean they're not out to get you. Vyzygoth's Grassy Knoll continues.
Well, here we are with another segment of the Grassy Knoll, and we're recording this on, I believe it is, the 24th of September. Remember, the 30th of September. Ooh, why would I say that? Well, maybe we'll talk about it later on. We have Andy Colvin with us. He's the author of The Mothman's Photographer, and there's no need to say where we've been. Probably he's been the most frequent and nearly long-time guest we've ever had, and it's been kind of fun now to look back through the years and all the ground that's been covered. So welcome back to what we would call the continuum, and how are things out in good old Seattle?
They are in flux. You know, this phenomenon is wreaking havoc all the time. It never gets, I think last time you said it was a tradition, and it got me thinking, you know, there's not much, there's tradition, but there's just so much to deal with when you're a paranormal researcher. I had a friend tell me last night who I interviewed in the Mothman Photographer 2 book, that he thinks, for instance, that he was one of the things that comes up in the new book I'm doing, the Mothman Photographer 3, is trying to figure out what caused some of the poltergeists and things that were happening in my house during the filming of the reality series. So I went and saw some psychics, and I've had psychics come to the house, and these strange things are being said by the different psychics about this strong female ancient presence that is somehow manifesting through my life or influencing me, and trying to identify what the symbolism is or what the particular deity it is. You know, I've heard everything from this Greek goddess to Isis, and maybe it's a female version of the Mothman or something.
Hey, let me ask you real quick.
A particular person was thinking, well, no, that was you, Andy. That was your unconscious causing those poltergeists, you know, due to other things going on in your life. Because I've just had this is really a difficult time in my life. Just the past doing the reality series, the last 5 years, 6 years have been the most difficult, and that's one of the reasons why I'm probably a little less organized than I normally would be. But I do believe in disorganization to some degree. There was a book called The Uses of Disorder by Richard Sennett, and he talked about the whole way that disorganization is like a creative force, you know. So, and he would look at the way organization tends to suppress it, and so there's a whole science to it.
Yeah. Well, I'm sorry.
Things randomly, you're going to get some real benefits that you wouldn't get otherwise. So,
but we can admit, and I mean, I agree with you. But a couple things. One, you know, it's the old story about what was the law they called it? Oh Lord, was it Parkinson's law? And I know what that name's associated with. But instead of Murphy's law, there was another law that said anybody who's got a very orderly desk doesn't get any work done. It just, you know, it looks like they're doing the thing and they're officious and all that, but really, you know, a neat desk gets nothing done. And I forget what that law was. It's a tongue-in-cheek law in business. Secondly, there are some people you would not want to be disorganized, and you would agree with that, like a surgeon that was going to cut on you. You know? But, as you said, and you qualified it, in a creative situation, I would have to admit, there probably is that randomness and such births a lot of ideas and innovations and creativity. Because, excuse me, being put into an organized box probably doesn't work out too well for those types. And I would agree that, you know, you're one of them. And I think you've said as much too, and Harriet remembered you also. I mean, being very artistically inclined in the grammar school days. Would that be an accurate assessment?
Yeah, and I think that there's, again, back to that book by Sennett, there's healing aspects to it. And I've seen this throughout the series where I've had different psychics work on me, or energy healers, and there's a randomness to how it's done. Literally I mean, and these are miraculous healings that not only on me, but in other people that I've seen, you know, in classes and things, done randomly. You're going in and you're just becoming as blank as you can be, the person doing the session, so that whatever it is that's out there can come in or can be seen. Whatever unusual connections are happening in the body-mind complex of the person needs to be noticed, and the more rigid the system you're using to look, the less you're going to get, or the more the more I guess limited the healing would be, I guess, because it's all about connection. So you're often connecting random things in the person's life, something that may be outside of them, seemingly something inside them, inside their mind, inside their body, some event from the past or the future. But it's truly, I had just this incredible session that really stalled the book. It stalled. I stopped the book. I wanted to get this session in the new book, so I put that in at the very last minute. A few pages of her session with me. It was just chock full of all the symbolisms we've talked about in the shows.
When you just kicked up a memory, and I won't, belabor this, but I think it's worth mentioning. When I was finishing up my undergrad, my first degree, I had stayed out for 2 years, so I was really trying to make up time. I think I did like 4 semesters in 3, something like that, by going to intersessions and summer sessions and such. And the way I got it configured was that my next to last class was taken during the summer and had me a creative writing class, which is pretty neat. I mean, that's a nice way to start to bring it all to an end. And you know what? I never saw this before, and I never saw it again. And I just wish I had taken down what the drill was. But we had an instructor, a professor, who was excellent. He had us, I can't begin to tell you all it was, but he had us writing in columns under headings, and he would make us jump from column to column and write something, and then he would jump us to another column. All the time we had to pat our free hand on our thigh. And this was to try to prime your pump to write poetry. All right? I mean, I couldn't believe the stuff that all of us came out with, and it was like just this, like, you know, supermarket for great ideas. And it seemed like it was not allowing you to focus, as opposed to, like, you know, focus on this and blah, blah, blah. This was like, you know, ordered randomness, if you can have that. And I'll never forget that. And I never, ever could find what that drill was. But boy, did it work. And I just want to throw that out to you because I thought, you know, in a sense, here's the creative process that's being actually primed by a certain amount of disruption, if you would. Ordered, in a sense. So, have you ever heard anything like that?
Well, as synchronicity would have it, I am reading a book about it right now.
Oh, no one's going to believe this is really... I mean, honestly, no one's going to believe this.
That.
Huh?
That idea.
Really?
That idea.
Okay.
And I think I've heard you correctly. You're writing in different columns.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah. There were headings for him. Otherwise, you know, why would we be there? But I do remember he made a grid on a blackboard, which we replicated on our paper. And then he would have us jump without telling us. And he would, I don't know what we wrote, but we had to do something. And then he would jump us to another column.
Well, this is clear. Now, you and I didn't discuss this beforehand, right?
No, in fact, not even in our pre-conversation did we do that.
So people know. Okay.
Right.
There's a book that I'm reading called The Structure of Magic, and there's two of them, 2 volumes by Bandler and the other guy's name escapes me, but they're the guys that started neuro-linguistic programming. And they are the guys who taught the teacher of the woman whose session I just mentioned. The one who gave me this great session is in essence in their lineage of that lineage of creative endeavor that you're discussing with the columns. So there is a connection there. This book is basically about how you find those columns, if you will, in the person. It's written for therapists. And a lot of it's based on the work of Milton Erickson, the hypnotherapist, the great Michael Jordan of hypnosis. So the book is, that was their other book. Their other books really break down Erickson. But The Structure of Magic is very similar too, and it's how you can use the things that Erickson sort of came up with in NLP. And you identify these columns within the person. They all sort of represent sub-personalities within the person. So you could do that just by saying, here's the subject matter column, you know, write about that, this, and this, and it would do effectively the same thing, which is that in order to create synthesis in the mind, you have to find all the polarities or sub-personalities or identify them and then have them all be present for the person at once, so that there's some conscious recognition of each of them, and then you start working with them all at once in the discussion. So the therapist starts to refer to the different parts, and sometimes it's done obviously, and other times it's not done obviously, in order to affect the person's unconscious, because a lot of times, some strange linkage has been made. Oftentimes when people have some kind of neurosis, and that linkage needs to be discovered and either severed or modified. And it's really easy to do, but once you get it all mapped out, it's really easy to do if you know what you're doing. And I can't say that I know what I'm doing because I'm a novice. I think when you look at what Erickson was able to do, it's like I can barely dribble, and he's out there, dunking 360s. So.
Oh, we're talking basketball. Okay, that makes me feel better.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it's such a complex subject. It's
right.
just beyond belief. I mean, because most people can't even get in touch with their unconscious anyway. I mean, so how did the guy even figure it out, you have to wonder.
Yeah.
The language is there, though, and it's a real thing. And it is the same in everybody to some degree, the structure of it, sort of how it works, the basic, like, put the message in, the data goes in the file, it stays there, unmodified forever until, there's a modification done. So this is always happening in childhood, of course, unconsciously, the kids just being programmed, and then they're all sort of set, and then if you want to change something, how do you do that?
Right.
Kind of science. That's what you were kind of referring to, and that's why that was so effective. I think your chalkboard thing was, integrating the different parts of, or at least some of the parts of your mind.
Yeah, and there's that whole thing. I guess. Well, we did a live show yesterday with somebody who was talking about backmasking, and whether or not some backmasking actually occurs as an unintended consequence just of whatever semantics you're using in whatever order. And sometimes it is definitely a conscious effort. And the thing is, we were talking about the subconscious element of it that might also yield something. And of course, reverse speech gets involved in this. And what I'm wondering about with these exercises and the one that we did, whether or not it made sure that it would not allow us to think in a left to right causal manner, A to Z, 1 to 100, and it just forced us to react rather than try. Because, even when you're discussing anything, it doesn't have to be a debate. Whenever you're presenting a point, you're always constructing your arguments as you're talking, and of course you take a hit, and then you figure, okay, what do I do? And that's okay. That's the way it's supposed to be. But when you disrupt that, there's still a core, I guess, inside of you that there's information there or whatever, or behaviors or responses that normally would not come out because you're thinking about doing this here. You're just reacting like it's like some kind of tennis match on steroids, And there must be something to it. I mean, there's a whole part of us, mentally at least, that we don't even know lives inside of us. None of us do, I think,
Yeah. That's where the conscious mind is being given a task and not being occupied with something, so that some other programming can go on over there in the unconscious. You do have to distract the conscious mind to drop the file in. So that's we've talked about the flash of light, the paranormal experiences is when you see that thing that doesn't make sense, that occupies your conscious mind. It blows it, blows the circuit enough that, okay, you're just sitting there now blank, or the doorway to your unconscious has been opened. And then you can do some, a skilled mind controller could, put in an alien, an abduction experience or whatever, and then have you go take this letter over to there. When Keel talked about that a bit at one point about the Mothman story, that he felt like some of the abductees are being used as couriers, for the CIA or whatever. And then I was just looking at the Woody Derenberger book, the Lanulos book, and there's some odd little details in there. That's a very unusual book, and I recommend people get it. They were picking up packages. I mean, one of Derenberger's, he didn't say it was his job, but he certainly said his boss, whoever that was picking up packages at the police station in Eleanor, West Virginia, which, if you know the map there, that's very close to the town that I've been talking about before, of Midway, which is where the old Indian Fort Ancient, what was the big Indian reservation or whatever was there, very near this supposed vortex that the NSA and NASA were studying, and where Indrid Cold probably lived. And that's the evolving part of the story, is that there's so much more to know about him. That now we're starting to see, if you just read, I need to reread these things several times because you would miss something like that. It was just a little mention. Yeah, we went to pick up a package at the police station in Eleanor, and it's like, why are appliance salesmen going to a police station, 20 miles down the road to get package. It doesn't. It's very odd. So, and Derenberger gives away a lot of little things in the book like that. So it's almost like it's a little secret code in there. Those with they can see what was going on. But again, I just think that they were probably doing a laser. Working on a death ray laser, death ray laser, some kind of scalar weapon perhaps, and a lot of secret nuclear technology and things were being made there in that whole stretch of river between Mound and Point Pleasant. And I think just seeing the tip of the iceberg in terms of what all was being done there.
Go ahead, Andy, sorry.
But it sort of made me think of the Nazi compound in Laurel Canyon that I heard about recently. Did I ever mention that? Did I mention that last time?
I know you mentioned it again. A lot of this stuff starts to all merge together on me. But, yeah, you did. And I don't even know if we did that over the air or whether that was an exchange through emails.
Yeah, and this is it just in my mind. I'm interested in that whole thing now with Laurel Canyon, just because it kind of reminds me of the valley that we lived in. You have the same owners, petrochemical guys owning the same areas. You have the same sort of intelligence activity, buildings, and so forth. And but there was near Laurel Canyon. They've discovered a Nazi compound that was being used during the, World War II for sure, and I don't know, maybe even before that. That's now been abandoned, but was really pretty major at the time, and it was right up the road from where Manson was staying with Dennis Wilson. So, it starts to make you start to get a sense that this is probably where Manson, maybe not at the compound. It's, maybe he probably hiked there and saw it. But maybe some of the people that left the compound, live in the area still. And that's where Manson sort of, he put himself right in the middle of, the Nazi thing, which I think you mentioned before. There was a woman named Maury.
Oh, yeah.
That whole talking about all the Nazi stuff in L.A. and I think that ties right in, to the petrochemical, the Rockefeller connection to Germany and all that being played out in, L.A. as well as other places, probably, like around Point Pleasant. I mean, definitely, absolutely, because we were shipping them the synthetic gasoline. Well, out of the valley to Germany.
At the risk of sounding like really phony or. Let me just say it. I was going to just say something to you about Maury, and I'll tell you why. As you were reminding me, she had talked about being victim to one of those Nazi, what you want to call it, enclaves or whatever. I think she said it was one in Manhattan Beach, and a number of them were attached to the jet propulsion labs. I'm hoping everything is okay with her. People have told me that they have not heard from her. I emailed her to an email address that was just, for those, other than those who contacted her through the website. She never responded. I got an email from Robert. We'll leave it at that. So if Robert's listening, he knows. And he said, look, she hasn't posted anything on her site since May. What's up? And I said, and I told him what I knew. And I emailed her again just to say, listen, just say I'm alive, and we'll see what happens. But I don't know.
Well, I don't know anything about it, but the name is suggestive. That Maori name has come up repeatedly. You got Maury Island. The Maoris are the Garuda-loving Indians in New Zealand. It's a Moor name. It's very related to Moor and to Mary. Just when I saw that, it could be, that name was chosen for that reason.
Yes, it'd be interesting to ask her why, because obviously that is not her real name, by the way, so she chose that, and was there anything in it? And again, this goes, and this is probably going to want to be in the theme of what we're doing, and let that be, that's fine, about this bit about subconsciously you do these things that really do mean something. Why she would have taken that if she wasn't really, did she know what she was doing as far as the etymology of the word, or did she do it because something inside of her, dinged it like that's a good idea, and she ran with it, but it actually is something representative of her. Do you know what I'm saying?
Yeah, totally. And because the ancient, what's the big clash in the world? I mean, if you in some ways it is the Nazis or the Northern Whites against the Maoris, the Moors of the darker skinned people of the South.
Yeah. Well, and now
they were living here with the Indians, and that's where you get the Rockefellers coming in. Who helped spawn the Thule Society and the Nazi occult societies, coming in and just flat out warfare against those particular, the darker, the more of an enemy they were, I think.
Living in the New York metropolitan area and at the mouth of the Hudson, to go up the Hudson Valley on either the west or the east shore, but especially if you rode on the east side, and I did that when I was writing motorcycle magazine pieces for a touring magazine out of California. It was called Rider, not to be confused with Easy Rider. And, little did I know what history and how much of America was impacted by what you would call the neighborhood on the East Bank. And that's Rockefeller, that's Roosevelt, that's Vanderbilt, that's Van Cortlandt, Rensselaer. Do you know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, to go and take a look at that real estate is magnificent. But what jailers they turned out to be for Americans, and we are obviously experiencing their hidden hand in the events that are taking as we speak, because everybody knows who's got a brain that something is afoot, and we're being conditioned for it with what's happening now. I've heard a lot of people that have just said, "Oh, this is no problem. The government will take care of it, and we'll all be okay." And it's like, okay, I fear to think how many Americans are under that delusion. But so my point is, those robber baron families, and those especially of the Eastern establishment, and those specifically that lived on the east side of the Hudson. If I knew what I knew, if I knew then what I knew now, I'd go with a can of spray paint. Kiss my no. At any rate,
Mary's. One of the things that we're getting tapped into now is this idea that Mary Bruner of the Manson family may have been the girl in the polka dot dress that was with Sirhan. And of course,
yes.
That would kind of with the attack on RFK's friends, Tate and Polanski by Manson, and Manson's seeming favorableness to Nelson Rockefeller, you start to see a picture, a pattern where Manson was being sent after two different notable figures.
Yeah, that email was worth passing on to you. Sometimes I wish that they would pass it. Well, I'm glad I got in the middle of this one, because I'm just glad I got a chance to read that and then pass it on to you, because there may be something there. There's not two ways about it. What's interesting too is, along with your audio this week, if all goes well, I should have an interview up with a Joan Mellon, who did a pretty big work on Jim Garrison and that whole situation after the Warren Commission. And one of the comments was made, and I always believe this too, that came out in that book, and that is, whoever killed Jack killed Bobby. So what's the common factor there? And so it wouldn't be, not that those characters go back to JFK, but who were they tied into that had the same desire to see both brothers, terminated? So that was interesting that one of those of the Manson posse could have been the polka dot dress in L.A. With Kennedy's assassination. And now we understand why too. When they identified two CIA agents there, they're like, "Why are they there? Why are they there?" Nobody really knows. And I think in Mellon's book, it pretty much states that the CIA was on the top of the pile as far as who wanted him dead and orchestrated the assassination. And so if that's the case, then yes, you've got a common denominator to both Kennedy assassinations, and that is the agency was involved. So. Yeah,
because those three agents were there photographed.
Was it three agents? Okay, yeah. Yeah. And I'm trying to go through this book. It's like 400 plus pages, and it is just a directory of all those that in any way, shape, or form were involved, being however small or great in the whole scheme of things, or perhaps even disinfo. But I'm looking forward to talking to her as we speak now. Hopefully that'll happen. I mean, it should, but you never know. So, but it's been bringing me back too, because just lately also there was a movie I caught on cable. I think it was called Power and Love or something like that. It talked about Judith Campbell Exner, reputed to be JFK's lover, and also shared by Sam Giancana. And that just brought me back in that whole era. And this happened also concurrently while somebody had said, would you please get Joan Mellon on? Of course, that's in the era. And I don't know, there's still undoubtedly a shroud of mystery, whereas one of the plumbers, if you will, in the Kennedy's assassination said, you'll never find out. You'll never get to the bottom. And even Robert Kennedy supposedly said, off the cuff, though he did not want Garrison to find out what he wanted to find out, had said that he was probably 90% right. He almost got the whole 9 yards. So, there you go. And of course it would repeat itself, obviously, with the assassination of RFK. Strange times, Andy. I mean, people get all worked up in the Patriot community about what's going on, or what they think might go on very shortly. But I'm telling you, it was the world upside down back in the late 60s, man. And I'm just glad I was a kid, because I was just like, I was stunned. I was preoccupied, and I'm like, it was just bizarre. So,
yeah.
All right.
It sure was.
If you want to go,
fascinating to study.
Yeah, because something was going on there that even today, even those who do the research, it's bigger than all of us. It's really bigger than all of us. But there was some kind of obvious, they call it a coup, call it whatever you want, but there was a definite violent change of the way things were going. It revolved around 3 assassinations that happened very close in time. And then,
And all of those were, Mothman people who saw Mothman were having visions of those. Well, not JFK, but the other 2. So I think it was just getting so tense in society, and George Hansen talks about this in his book. I can't remember the name, but that this during highly stressful points, more paranormal. Somehow they figured out lab tests for this and found that it does increase psychic and paranormal activity, like poltergeist things. So I think it triggered this archetypal deity to be seen. And it's funny because it just came out that a list of the Flatwoods, Flatwoods monster came in 1952, and there were all these UFOs seen. And a book has been written about all the different places that land, all the UFOs supposedly landed and so forth. And I was noticing that all the ones in the Kanawha Valley were all places where Mothman were seen. Now, it's kind of suggestive of, that those are 2 different ways of, the same phenomenon, just looking different. And in fact, there was one witness in the Silver Bridge, which which should be out like next week, maybe by the time people hear this. Where was I?
You were talking about Mothman sightings at the same places in West Virginia.
Yes, it's the same phenomenon, looking different. And then we had one witness who saw a UFO turn into a Mothman, the Mothman, in Gray Barker interview. So it could be that, or it could be that the Flatwoods incident is another part of this whole conspiracy to make people believe in aliens and Mothman, which I do think is a real unconscious phenomenon, collectively visionary, hallucinatory thing that's happening, is which has a messianic or message-sending capability and tendency, is appearing there to somehow send this message to look at the Flatwoods incident more closely as something that could also be part of the assassination thing. Mm-hmm. Maybe the same people, same agency that was running these mind control UFO abduction ops was the same folks doing, setting up the assassination teams and so forth. So it's still unclear, and it probably will always remain unclear what it really was, which one of those it really was.
I would hazard to say that we're going to find out some generation, maybe you those younger than we, will find out, because obviously something's going on. And I was looking for an email from Paul Santu. We were talking about this, and whether or not, something does exist. There's no two ways about it. Why they've played games, or why they've allowed games to be played with us, probably is just to make the thing so muddy, nobody really knows, and everybody goes off on these other tangents. But something is going on. My only question is, whatever that technology is, who's running it, and will it be turned against us? That's the only thing I'm thinking about. Because something is definitely there. They've allowed people to see something. They've not, I say they. I have no idea who even they are. But we have been allowed to see this, to report on it somewhat. And then, of course, the government throws you the nightcap situation. It's like, yeah, great, what does that mean? So something's going on. In the end, will it be malevolent? That's my concern. My guess is probably yes, but there's no way to tell. And this may also, whether you subscribe to it or not, Andy, but understand I do, and that is how it plays into what we see in Scripture, that, we've not thought about in terms of what is going on with, shall we say, creatures in the earth, but it'll be revealed one time, at some time. If this isn't for nothing, let's put it that way. Wouldn't you agree? All this stuff isn't for nothing.
Yeah, well, on the one side you have, the ancient myths talking about this archetypal Birdman, so that's kind of the oldest, explanation. And then you've got evidence like the fact that Puharich was doing voice-in-the-head experiments, where you project voices into people's heads. At the time that the Nine, we talked about the Council of Nine, was introduced by the Round Table Foundation. So, you've got these, high-level sort of British kind of occult groups sort of, pushing this whole theory about this orbiting space intelligence. And Puharich was actually, doing some work at that time that would allow them to beam that right in to somebody. And, of course, he was a big proponent of the Nine. So, they could have been beaming, I guess they could have been beaming Mothman prophecies into people's heads, too, if you want to go that far. So, who knows?
It was either you or Go Rightly. And it's all starting to mix out. It'll either be like Andy Go Rightly, or Adam Colvin. But did you send me the file? I'm kind of thinking it was Go Rightly, but I got a file. And I had told you about Puharich being involved with John Newland in that One Step Beyond episode.
Yeah, we talked about that. Yeah.
All right. Now you didn't send me anything in the last 2 weeks, did you?
No.
All right. I probably should send it to you. I sent it on to John Muir.
Well, you talking about the Plan 9 from Outer Space thing?
It just went into Puharich again being involved in this.
Well, that's where I got that little chunk from.
All right.
That was right out of that article, and they also mentioned that the Nine's channeler. Supposedly there was a channeler who could just plug into the Nine, and then the Nine would say a bunch of stuff, and his name was Tom, which the Tom, was the name of my friend, and then Tom and Andy was the name of the band that did the Mothman Prophecy soundtrack, that kind of Tom name thing. But if you it turned out in the case of the Nine that the channeler wasn't really Tom, it was Atom. So it starts to sound Egyptian. And if you spell atom backwards, you have Mota. It has the Mut word in it, which is Mot, the Egyptian goddess, which is related to the moth, which is related to perhaps the symbology of Mothman. And atom is also very close to the word Etam, which is where they download the AT&T signals in West Virginia. So. Lots of little Masonic wordplay going on in the Nine literature. I was going to mention Woody for some reason. Oh, Woody Derberger in that book, I mentioned before, he was talking about. He thought that the aliens were coming from the planet Cerberus, and of course it sounds like a mispronunciation of Cerberus, the three-headed dog. Of hell, Hound of Hades, and there's also a Mon word for that creature. It's called manes, demones. which I guess is where the word demon comes from. It's the demons in hell. So you have Mon words being associated with, in other ways, to sort of the undead or the underground. The word emanate is a Mon word, and it's I think it's this idea of the Adam Kadmon coming out of the mound, the messianic, life-giving, creative force, just the creation of people coming from the earth somehow. And in the Kaluli myths, which is the New Guinea tribe that my teacher studied, their main word, their main myth, and they're a bird-loving. This is a total culture built around birds. They believe that they turn into birds. They talk to birds. They can talk to their ancestor through a bird. They believe that their ancestors have turned into specific birds, and then the birds actually make sounds and do things that are reminiscent of that's how they identify the ancestors in the birds, I guess, is they watch the birds really closely. But the bird that is the key is called the Mooney bird, so that's sort of a Mon word too. I guess I kind of went off on a tangent. You there?
No, I'm just thinking. I don't know. Okay.
I don't know I don't know why I launched into Woody there.
That's okay.
It was it sort of tapped into this whole thing with. That's probably just going to keep going. Cerberus was captured by Heracles, and then you start to get into some of these H words like Heyoka, Hercules, Heraclitus. And there's some similarities through the different traditions with these HE words, kind of like Horus words, HOR meaning time. They're sort of related to time. And there's Typhon was Cerberus's father, and Typhon was a birdman. So you kind of have in the Woody Derenberger's tale of Indrid Cold, you have the symbology linking to the Birdman as well.
Well, and Typhon legendarily was the assassin of Osiris.
Yeah. And so I'm starting to get the sense that Indrid, some of these, that there were some Crowleyites around this situation, like Alan Greenfield. I don't know if Alan's a Crowleyite or not, but he's definitely an occultist in that vein, and his books show a lot of inside knowledge about the OTO, and he was there at the time, hanging out with the Great Barker. So you kind of wonder if there weren't some Crowleyites. They're there because the Birdman's there, because Crowley was definitely into Birdmen. And maybe they were the ones sort of playing Indrid Cold. Maybe Indrid Cold was, some of these Crowleyites planting, symbolisms in their stories to people to try to evoke some magical working or something. Mm-hmm. And Greenfield has actually alluded to that in relation to, the Silver Bridge collapse, that there were some energy set forth and so forth. They all want us to kind of feel like Crowley was the guy who introduced the gray aliens to the whole, in 47 when he died. And I'm not sure why they want to do that, but that is kind of what they seem to propagate. So.
No, one of the things I was thinking about when you were talking about birds and such, and I don't know if you can hear what's going on here. This is kind of bittersweet, but I mean, obviously, in the days when Reggie, who we call Vyzygoth, was alive, he would know I was here. He couldn't see me, but he could hear my voice, and he would start busting my chops, like, where are you? And he would start ratcheting. Well, since he's passed, we've gotten two other birds, and that's what you're hearing right now. So it's kind of reminiscent of when Vyzygoth was here. But Vyzygoth was doing it to give me the business, to have me come out and spend time with him. These two are just doing it between themselves, but you know what I'm saying? It's just, it's kind of nice. It's kind of bittersweet. And while you're talking about this as well, my wife and I have always been like, not Audubon types, but subbirders, if you know what I mean. And I don't know why that is. I don't know. I have no idea. I just think there's something something that is, I mean, they're put here for a reason, and I certainly, love their presence. But whether we're in an urban environment or whether we're in a rural environment or somewhere in between like here, they're always there. Nobody knows what life would be like without them. It would be a very quiet and rotten world. But to watch them, I guess because they're so light and petite and they can fly, which we can't, and don't we all want to, so to speak. Here we go again. But, the pets, some of the pets we have are the birds that we don't have within the house, if you know what I mean.
Yeah.
The attachment between human beings and that's why I think I probably should read Birdie again. You remember Birdie?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I read it with a different mindset when I read it back in the 70s, whenever it was, and I probably should read it again. I probably missed a lot, but I would probably understand better now. So, again, I think that, do you know anybody really who has a problem with birds? Do you know what I mean? Nobody doesn't like them. Nobody doesn't look at them and marvel at them for what they can do that we can't.
Yeah, some of them shoot them, though.
Well, I know. If it were for existence and I had no choice, I hate to say this, it's a pun, it's like fair game, but I'd rather not. I just, I have a problem with that. So, however, they do bring a lot of joy, to our lives, no matter where we've been. And I hope I don't mean to go on the syrupy thing here, but when you're talking about Garuda and such, there really never seems to be such a nefarious association with winged creatures. There are some yet, without a doubt. But that's why when you were saying to me that Mothman should not be seen, or the Garuda should be seen as an evil entity, I can understand that because I don't even know, really, why anybody has ever associated something bad with winged creatures, if you will. And I'll tell you another thing, too, just as an aside, but the movie that made the winged monkeys bad guys, and we had somebody on to speak to that, in Baum's books, they are not bad guys, in fact. Though they're scary looking, and I always was made uncomfortable about that in the movie rendition of The Wizard of Oz. Turns out that they were not bad creatures. So there you go. Does that ding anything in your brain?
Well, yeah. The bird man is in Buddhism is the state stabilizer. He's the and there's some stuff in the new book about this, how he represents or he represents enlightenment. So the more you approach or think about that aspect or his symbologies, look at them, study them, you bring yourself into contact with a state stabilizer that whatever awakenings you've achieved are not lost.
Mm-hmm.
As we go through life, we have these epiphanies, and if you can continually come back to meditating on the symbolisms around the Garuda, you'll help cement those. And I found that's been, that sort of doing this research has been really good during this time of my life. That's been very difficult because I get to come back to healing ideas. So, it's built into the very, nature of the symbols of, in all the different paintings and sculptures.
I was wondering, we had about 13 minutes left or so. If I could kind of go back for a second, or at least for the remainder of the show, I'll be honest, to speak to the subconscious. I've heard talk. I don't pay much attention to it, to the collective consciousness and all this other stuff. I'm just going to throw this out because we really have never talked about this particular event or what has been happening kind of on the side with my website. One of the things that happened just recently was that I got an ad from an Israeli magazine prior to 2000 in which they showed the trade towers and a plane approaching it. Not necessarily, I haven't put it on my website yet, but Andy Sr. has it on Udikins for 911truth.blogspot.com. I got to put it up because I just got a translation of what it says from Barry Chamish. And Chamish was kind of curious. And sometimes, as Barry does, will give you the business about something. But it has these towers on the left-hand side and this plane, from the lower right-hand side, on an upward vector. Obviously, the proportion is not that you're looking at a crash, but here you go again. The plane, the towers, and I sent the magazine ad is all in Israeli, so I asked him about it, and I'm just going to take a look for it real quick here because he did translate it for me. But then I knew that Barry would start asking me questions about it, which I don't really blame him. But here it is. The translation is: realize your sweet dreams, collect elite packages, and fly to America. It's a candy bar ad. So you take the wrappers, I guess, off the elite candy bars and you send them in or something like that. You might be in a drawing to go to America. But I have compiled, through John Valentini and other people have sent me stuff, ads that I won't say are fixated on the towers, but just have an unusual relationship to the towers. Like there is I don't know if you're familiar with the bourbon Maker's Mark, but their signature bottle has obviously the top and the neck flowing down with red wax. All right, it's over-poured red wax. That's what their thing is. That's their signature, if you will.
Yeah.
They did. I don't know if you ever saw this, and it's on my website. There's two places for these images, and again, pre-2001. And here's the towers and a couple other buildings overflowing with this red wax. But obviously it looks like blood. All right, so there you have that. We've done...
Barry Chamis address?
His what?
What's the website for Barry Chamis again, so I can...
It's barrychamish.net or .com.
Okay.
But he doesn't have it posted. It's Andy that has it posted.
Oh.
He gave me the translation, and I'm a little slow in getting that up.
Uticans for 911 Truth?
Yep. .blogspot.com. You can hit it off my website. And it's up there now. And so I don't do my own web stuff, so it's late getting up there. But the Maker's Mark is there, and also there was an ad for General Electric. You're going to love that. I think we might have talked about this in an Italian magazine pre-2001 or September 2001. I think it was March. Arrigo is the magazine, and here's this General Electric ad, and it's for refrigerators. And one of the designer models is having this front of the refrigerator with the New York skyline with the towers prominently out there, and a big old aircraft, obviously commercial airliner, coming from the top of the scene, heading toward the towers. And then there's others, and it goes on and on. Andy Sr. also found one from New York Magazine, a cover from March 2001. There's the towers. And there's a woman's face, half of it, because it bleeds off to the right side of the edge of the page, obviously in horror. And it says, what are you going to do when the real estate boom is over? So they get the towers, the woman's face, transmogrified in this, etched with horror. And then you've got the word boom in there. Well, why is the real estate associated with the trade towers? All right, now I'll stop there. But here's where I'm going to go with this. Now, you've heard me say this, and if you've gone to the website, maybe you're taking a look around, maybe you're not. But here's what I'm wondering. I had said to Barry, the only thing I'm saying is this a coincidence? It could be. Or is there something subconscious that's going on? Is there a preoccupation, subconsciously, with the towers? Is there something tragic or catastrophic in anticipation of, prescient of, about the towers? I said, the only thing I don't get, Barry, I mean, not the only thing, but if I were to do something in a foreign magazine and I wanted to use a symbol of the United States, I would use the Statue of Liberty or the Washington phallic symbol or the Capitol. Why the trade towers? All right, now that's a lot, and you gave me a lot of room there. What I'm asking is, and I said this to Barry, look, Barry, I don't know. This is metaphysics. Things go bump in the night. But is there something there that people always anticipated? Or is it, I don't know.
I think so. I think there's both, actually. I think some of these are closer to where the designer knew something, and some aren't. For instance, somebody who worked for General Electric, or, at the top, may have known because, they would be in the loop, and that ad may have gotten done because of somebody's foreknowledge. Some of the other ones,
I mean, that Maker's Mark is probably the ghoulish of them all.
Yeah.
For like, not necessarily the right reasons. It's here you got all this stuff dripping down, and of course, if it never happened, if the towers were never hit, then that would not be a big deal.
What year was that? Do you know?
The Maker's Mark can only be identified as pre-2001.
Yeah.
And I forgot who tried to go back and figure out what magazine that was in, but got not any resistance, but just got no help from whomever they spoke to, I guess, in the company's PR. Or they're at least told to, really don't know anything about it, which could be the case. But whoever contacted them was not treated badly. Just, we really don't know. And it could be over time, but probably, because I've tried to go back and get, what magazines were carrying my ad that went on from 73 to 75, and it's all long gone. Nobody remembers who or has any record of where it came from. But that one is especially upsetting, and, for obvious reasons.
Just wondering if there's anything in the picture that would date it.
What, that Maker's Mark?
Yeah, like some of the surrounding buildings.
I really couldn't. I've been pretty much over that, and over it. What I mean, going through it. It's anything that's almost after 80 is going to be the same as it was in 2001. They did what they did there for all intents and purposes. There might be something. There may be a little thing. Maybe some waterfront. I don't have it in front of me. That might have been changed. That's a possibility.
My guess is that would be. I don't see a direct possible much of a link to the perpetrators through Maker's Mark, unless it had to do with Kentucky bourbon, Kentucky, bluegrass conspiracy, maybe.
No, but this is what I'm saying, and this is what I also said to Barry in the end. I said, Barry, look, and we may have talked about this, Andy, but I grew up on the Palisades, which was an elevated plateau in New Jersey overlooking the Hudson River and the skyline. Great place. Any place you went in Bergen County along the east part of it, you could see the trade towers and you could see the Statue of Liberty. I'm sorry, the Empire State Building. But when we watched the trade towers go up and up and up, we all looked at each other and said, someone's gonna fly a plane into that. It was almost like the towers begged you to go ahead, hit me. Because they're so obscenely large to boot, and in that part of Manhattan, which is flatter than a pancake for the most part. It's the old Wall Street area. Nothing really went vertical all that much. And as the story goes, what they had to clear out of there to make way for this WTC complex put a lot of small merchant guys out. It was a really funky place to be down there. Besides the financial district, it was a great place to shop. So when they put them up, it was almost like somebody going, come on, make my day. And we waited for that to happen. And then the day of the bombing, in what was that, February 93, I believe, I'm driving east on Route 80, again, with everything out in front of us, Guy and myself, and we see smoke coming from the top of the WTC. We're going, and I said, somebody flew a plane in there. God damn it, they finally did it. We throw on the radio, and lo and behold, there was the bombing, and what we were seeing was the smoke finding its way out through the ventilation system and coming out at the top. But you always expected it. It was like everybody in the back of their minds figured it would happen. Now, you tell the story of a friend of yours who had some kind of premonition about this, correct?
Yeah.
Have you ever spoken to him if he lived there for any length of time, almost everybody walked around, they don't think about it every day, maybe not every year, but the idea about, geez, how has somebody not hit that, some whack job or something? Well said.
Yeah. What I wonder is talk about programming, how have we gotten to a place where people, I'm sure very few people have looked at this predictive programming stuff with regard to 911 and all the previous symbolisms that were coming out.
That were in movies and such, yes.
How many people have just looked at the footage of Building 7 coming down, and you look at the squids coming out, and what does that do? Do people just not look at it, or do they look at it, and then in their mind they have cognitive dissonance because they know they have to lie in life. That's what it reminds me of every time I see it, is we are a culture of liars. That's it. It's everybody's walking around knowing that we're living a lie. We're not. And I think it's affected people very negatively. I do. I think there's a lot less trust and a lot less everything, lots of things, just because it's always there. That knowledge that we're not going to admit something.
Well, we may
happen.
I was talking in one of these days rants I do about institutionalized lying. Like, that's just what happens now. And I wouldn't even say so much from people to people, but when it comes to big stuff and important stuff, and when you ask what you consider or you're being told are authority figures, they lie to you. And all right, now, I'm going at it a little bit here, but maybe this kind of brings it home. When remember I told you there was a time before I met Lady Viz where I figured, it ain't happening for me. I'm not getting married. It ain't going to happen. And it sucked. I mean, it really did. I mean, I wanted to be involved with someone. And I'll tell you this. I will admit that one of the rare times when I was intimate with a woman, and I kind of knew her well enough, I would say, just tell me you love me. I know you don't. Just tell me you love me. I just want to hear it. With the lights out and you hear, just tell me you love me. And it worked. So where am I going with this? Not that I want to, open up that aspect of my life, but now I look at what's going on, and the worse things get, the more I think people are saying, look, just lie to me. Just please lie to me. I don't know. That's what I think is happening out there, Andrew. I think there's a lot of people who know, probably more than the majority do, that something's really not right, but it's just like, hey man, whatever it is, just lie to me. What do you think?
Well, yeah, and I think that occurs in this manner. I just figured this out, and so I guess it's a provisional theory. But you and I were talking about the Brokaw comments that he made just as the towers were coming down. And remember, 2 seconds before the second tower came down, which was the moment. That was when everybody knew it was really an op.
Mm-hmm.
2 seconds before, Brokaw and his team say, "A word has gone out from the Pentagon. Duck for cover." Why would they say that? Doesn't make any sense on TV. I mean, who's supposed to duck for cover? Are we supposed to duck for cover in Seattle? Well, I mean, it was a hypnotic statement. And then the towers start falling. Brokaw says one statement, and then he reverses it a couple of minutes later and says it again backwards, which was terrorists have declared war on us, and then we have declared war on the terrorists. And what I think happened there was he created a loop. There's no law. It's a sealed loop. There's no way to prove that there are terrorists or who is us. It's a statement that appeals to the unconscious, but it's vague and meaningless in a way because it's undefined. And the only way to define it is to bring in outside elements to it. But when you create that loop and you create the reverse, justifying the other, you've created a sealed loop that occupies the conscious mind.
Mm-hmm.
As it follows that loop over and over again like a mouse on a treadmill. And then, boom, you can introduce whatever else you want at that time.
Yeah.
To the unconscious.
I often think, too, I don't know that this has been the case. I think it has been in the last 7 years or so, and it might be before the next shoe drops. But one of some of the artists that they got out of showing the towers go down again and again, it made me start to think that as long as they keep showing that, they keep making us all victims. And in doing so, it makes us pliant. And there is some gain that they get out of that. So I think that it lives on in the memory.
Yeah, you start imagining that you were victimized successfully.
Well,
right?
Yeah.
So you have to therefore feel a little less powerful than you did before.
And for others of us who kind of get it, or do definitely get it, it's a reminder, we can do this again, and there's nothing you're going to do about it. And they're right. Now, what Chamish wrote me, I have no idea about this. Maybe a lot of people do out there. But Chamish said, what of the night security worker or whatever who, came home, I guess, before dawn, and obviously looked out his window and saw the skyline, went to sleep, woke up at 5 p.m. on Tuesday 9/11/2001 and looked to find no towers. According to Barry, the guy went crazy. Now, I've never heard that story before, but I don't think anybody who encounters that, who thinks about this, would say, what would you do? I mean, can you imagine? Can you imagine what that would have been like? So.
Well, no, I guess I can't, but I don't know if we've run out of time, but I wanted to mention the name for that thing that I just described, that loop. It's called a tote. That's a word that Erickson came up with, and it's basically a set of actions that one undergoes long enough to where it becomes unconscious. You know, you've got a series of, let's say, to put the toast in and put the butter on it, you have to do a series of actions, and at first the brain doesn't have them in there, and so it takes a few times for it to get to the point where you no longer have to consciously think about doing it to do it, and that therefore you have created a tote. And then so as you're working with a patient, you have to figure out what the totes are, and sometimes you use totes and so forth. So in the case of this false or solipsistic, I guess, loop, you know, one thing justifying the other, terrorists attacking terrorists, that created a tote that kept everyone's conscious mind busy long enough to introduce all these other things that they wanted to introduce that day, and in the days following, and then totes are harder to break. So I mean, it's just more of a solid construct to try to go in and break up later. So they definitely were doing it. I mean, I don't think that you can. I mean, it's clear that the media knew. You know, you got the BBC footage of the. You know, that they already knew it was coming down 20 minutes before it did. You know, there's absolute proof there. And so the media knew, and they were, I mean, now that we know, we can prove that they knew. So then what else can we prove? We can look at their behavior, that day and analyze it and figure out, let's face it, if you knew it was going to happen, you'd probably try to take advantage of it some way, wouldn't you?
Absolutely.
Irrational, so.
Well,
from their point of view.
Well, we've entered an era, and I'm scanning my disorganized office, and it is hard to read because it's just like swallowing tacks, but you got to do it, and that is Trotsky's Terror and Communism. Didn't I say more? It's just that in the 20th century, terror has been modernized and perfected to new horrifying heights, and that's what we're going to be stuck with until whatever happens finally, just blows. And I think 9/11 was a very, very ominous indicator of how reckless, but with control, our handlers are. That now they would have the biggest body count for a single event. Well, actually, it was 3, I guess, or 4, depending on how you want to look at it. But that Rubicon has been crossed, that barrier has been broken through, and now they're playing what we would call for keeps. That's chilling, and a lot of people can't handle that. I understand that, but that is the nature of the people who rule us, and it's here to stay. I see it here now. Yeah, Terror and Communism by good old Trotsky. That's something people should look at, too, because there's some future-telling things in there. And I'm not laying this on Trotsky. I mean, he also was a tool of the banksters and others. So that's an era that has been created that day, and it ain't over yet. That's too bad. And I know for a lot of folks who have said to me, they hope for better, and I understand because they have children, as you do, Andy. I hope so, too. But it wasn't our doing that decided to play this next final card. And who knows what's going to happen next. I mean, they are psychotic.
Well, yeah, I mean, they're asking for more money now than the entire war has cost for the banks.
Yeah, and this is another thing that's... Well, it's not just an American thing, and I think people have to realize this, that I wouldn't say it's a completely global thing, but it certainly is going to impact more than just ourselves. That's why there's more to it than just kneecapping the United States again. This is going to be for a new global money order. And and we're seeing it happen before our eyes. They're calling it something else as usual, as you said. They lie, and so folks thinks it's just something we got to fix here. No, it's not. There's ramifications for this much further. So it's a very interesting time, as we knew would happen, and it's going to get more interesting next year. But I think the time of being left alone for whatever we had in the last few years and before is over. It's just over. So you got to deal with it.
Yeah, we might see more terrorism. Yeah.
That's guaranteed. That is guaranteed. All right, brother. Listen, thanks for being with us. We'll probably go back to the timelines next time around, and hopefully we can do that probably in the next 2 weeks if that's a possibility to come back and do that. But I thank you for again taking the time out so we can talk about some of these things that have popped up without knowing it in both our experiences and purview. So,
thank you very much.
All right. So I'll talk to you soon.
All right.
All right. See you then. Bye bye now.